So you just heard an introduction from me and who I am, a little bit more about who I am. So why not start out the presentation with some adorable pictures of children, and in the center are my 4 brothers who are all older than me. You can see my 2 oldest brothers rocking some awesome perms there, but this is us growing up. I grew up in Utah and really loved the outdoors and had a lot of close relationships with my family. But mental health was not something that we talked about in my family growing up, and was not something that really like we had an eye on, even though definitely experienced mental health concerns in our family. And we'll talk about that today, about how families talk about this and how that's changed. Now, these 2 other adorable human beings on the sides are my own children. So I have a 2.5-year-old and a 4.5-year-old. So I'm just in the start of hopefully raising healthy human beings, but certainly can understand the pressures of what it means to be a parent. And also, when do I get a chance to show off my kids to random strangers? So there you go. So our goals for today, there are 4 things that I hope happen. And I want to touch briefly just on the importance of mental health. My guess is that many of you feel like mental health is important, and that's why you're here today. Introduce some concepts to help with navigating transitions. Learn a few skills that you can use with your kids and in your personal life. I'm actually going to talk to you about 10 specific skills today that I hope will be helpful. And then just have fun and enjoy the presentation. That's always my goal. I want to have fun while I'm presenting. I want you to have fun while you're in the audience. So hopefully we're able to accomplish that. I'm going to ask some different questions along the way, so feel free to chat in responses to the questions, and then we can see those. And then as questions come up, feel free to chat those in. I probably will wait till the end to answer questions, but as they come up, I'm happy to see those come through. So like I said, I'm going to introduce about 10 different concepts today, but you don't want to do them all. So, if there's something that stands out to you and you think, oh, you know what, that's a small thing I can do, go ahead and focus on that one. But I'm going to give a lot of different choices and options today for you to think about. All right, so with that, here we go. Okay, so pediatric mental health is a really, really big concern, and it's something that has a huge impact on our society. We call it the 20/20 problem, which is 20% of children have a mental health diagnosis, and usually that happens, about 50% of them have them by the age of 14. So we have a lot of kids who experience mental health issues. The other side of the 20 is that only 20% of those 1 in 5 kids actually get mental health services. So there's a huge gap between the number of kids we know who have mental health problems and the kids who are actually receiving services. The other thing that's important to know is it's actually moved during the pandemic. It became 1 in 4 kids that had a mental illness, a diagnosable mental illness. And we saw mostly rates of depression and anxiety increase during the pandemic. But in general, mental health problems are something that all of us experience. So regardless if you have a mental health diagnosis or not, everybody has periods of time in their life where they have anxiety or they have, depression. And for some people that will last long enough that it's something that should be diagnosed and treated. And so we want to make sure that, regardless if your kid has a diagnosis or not, that you're paying attention to their mental health and you're doing things proactively to help support mental wellness, just the same way that you do with, their dental hygiene. They're brushing their teeth every single day. And, like you're having them do annual checkups and getting, vaccinations and things to make sure they stay well. We want to have the same approach towards youth mental health. And by and large, the good news is that parents these days really do care about kids' mental health. So there was a national survey done by Beach Acres Parenting Center done in the last couple of months. And one of the things they found is that growing up, the majority of us report as parents that our parents didn't talk to us about mental health. And again, I was certainly in that camp. And my parents are wonderful, loving people. It's just we didn't think about mental health that way. But today, when you look at it, only 13% of parents who respond to the survey say they don't discuss it now. So by and large, this is something that parents are caring about and keeping an eye on. And you can see here, 8 in 10 parents think there's a strong connection between building a child's strengths and improving their mental health. And I'll talk about kind of how you can do that. And that there's something important about providing intentional support. So the good news is kids are experiencing more, well, that's not the good news. It's a weird thing to say. Kids are experiencing more mental health problems, but the good news is we're paying more attention to them, and there's things we can do to help kids improve their mental health. Now, I will put the caveat on here that I'm going to talk about a lot of things today that you should be doing for yourself. And parental mental health matters a lot. And so we know from the Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry that if a parent has a mental illness, it increases the risk of their children having mental illness. So if a parent has an anxiety disorder, their kids are 4 to 6 times more likely to develop an anxiety disorder. Now, there's a lot of contributors to that. So part of it is genetics, part of it is environment. But in general, taking care of your mental health is one of the most important things you can do for your children. Oftentimes the analogy is used that, like when you're in an airplane, they go through, and if you have little kids, they stop at your seat and they remind you, put on your own air mask before you put on theirs. Again, because you want to make sure that you have air so you can help your child when they need it, and you don't want to risk you passing out. And so the same is true with mental health. You really need to be doing things proactively to take care of your mental health, to really show up the way that you want to as a parent. So cool, mental health matters. What are we going to do about it? Well, I'm what is known as a dialectical behavior therapist. It's a very specific type of therapy that I believe should just be taught to everybody. I think they should teach this in kids' health classes at school. But dialectical behavior therapy is really focused on how to create a meaningful life that is supported by your values. And it's not necessarily all about getting rid of symptoms or mental health problems. It's more about how do you strengthen yourself, and when you go through hard times, how do you get through it without making it worse? So it's very strengths focused. And I'm going to give you several kind of concepts today to help you start thinking about how can I maybe integrate some of these into my life and into strengthening my kids. So in dialectical behavior therapy, it says finding your wise mind. Well, what the heck is wise mind? It's a way to think about, and it's a framework for seeing the world. So in dialectical behavior therapy, there's a belief that you have 3 different mindsets. You have your rational mind, which is all about facts. It ignores emotions. It's just like, this is the facts, and based on the facts, I need to do this. So it's very rational and logic-based. You have your emotion mind. This is what feels good. It's all about emotion, and that drives things. If you've ever said something to somebody and later you're like, I can't believe I said that, it's because you were in emotion. You were in emotion mind, and it just came flying out of your mouth. And the idea is that you want to get to a place, and you want to promote your kids getting to a place of being in wise mind. And what wise mind does is it honors kind of emotions and recognizes emotions. It thinks about facts, and it integrates both of them. So, if I'm going to the grocery store and I'm completely in rational mind, I'm like, look, I just need food to survive. I'm going to buy, I need healthy food. So I'm going to buy the quinoa. I'm going to buy the broccoli. I'm going to buy the brown rice. There's a sale on this food. I don't even like it, but it's on sale. It's economical. And that's how I build my grocery list. If I'm in emotion mind, I'm going to just share some things that you're probably going to judge me about. I'm probably buying Red Bull. I'm probably buying flaming hot Cheetos. I'm definitely buying donuts because that's what my emotion mind wants. Wise mind is a combination. You have to have some healthy food, but don't buy food that you don't like. There's a lot of healthy foods that you can probably like. And you know what? Even though maybe I'm not going to buy all the things, I could probably, have some flaming hot Cheetos. I don't need to eat the whole bag, but maybe I could have a combination. And that's the idea. So one of the things that's really helpful is to start thinking about this with your kids and introducing these concepts of like, what part of your brain is that coming from? Was that your rational mind, your emotional mind, or your wise mind? As a parent, I often think to myself, what would my wise mind tell me to do right now? Because it's not the place of reactivity, it's the place of reflection. I'm reflecting on how I feel, I'm reflecting on what I'm thinking, and then I'm making a decision. Now, if you have little kids, a lot of times we talk about this as their lizard brain and their wizard brain. And my 2.5 and 4.5-year-old, we talk about this all the time. So get really, really angry. Was that your lizard brain or was that your wizard brain? Lizard brain, we just kind of act and our mad gets control of us. Our wizard brain tells us to take a deep breath. And again, these are concepts that even small children can understand, but it provides us a way to take a step back. And we don't want to be reacting all the time. Most of us just spend all day reacting. We want to be more reflective. So I have some people who will tell me like, shouldn't we just always be in rational mind? Rational mind is like a great way to go. And as parents, sometimes we are like overly rational and we try to hit our kids with rationality when they're in emotion mind, and that's not helpful. But I also like to share with people, rational mind taken to the extreme is not always helpful. And Sometimes people who are overly rational are kind of annoying. So here's some great examples from Sheldon. Love is in the air. Wrong. Nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide are in the air. And you can't make a half sandwich. If it's not half of a whole sandwich, it's just a small sandwich. It's all very rational. So that's great. You kind of have these concepts in your mind that we come from different places, and the idea is to integrate those. How do we actually get kids there? Now, you probably all heard of mindfulness, and mindfulness is great for a lot of different reasons. But one of the reasons we do mindfulness is because it helps build wise mind. Wise mind doesn't live in the future. It doesn't live in the past. It lives in the present moment. Wise mind is aware of thoughts, sensations, and feelings, and then it responds. So thinking about, are there practices that you're doing at home that build mindful activity? In mindfulness, these are both breathing examples that you can do. So there's this great chart. You can find this online. You can print it off. I do this with my kids. So before we go to bed, we go up to the rainbow and we breathe in. And then we breathe out. We just do rainbow breathing every night. And what that does is it strengthens a child's parasympathetic system. That's the opposite of their fight or flight. And when you help strengthen that system, it's easier for them to call on that and kick in. For teens, doing paced breathing, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, can be very helpful. But there's a ton of mindfulness activities out there that you can Google and find. But can you make mindfulness a part of your daily activities, or at least 3 or 4 times a week, that maybe when you sit down for breakfast or dinner, you start with just a brief mindful activity? Because again, mindfulness is not about like having great insight. It's about calming your brain down, staying in the present moment, and being aware of what's happening inside of you instead of just letting what's happening inside of you drive all your decisions. One other way to think about it, I'll give you a quick little analogy. So this is where you can chat. And if we were in person, I'd make one of you do this, but I'm going to have to do it instead. So here's some salt, and here's a tiny little cup. And if I pour the salt packet in the cup and I stir it up and I drink it, how do you think it's going to taste? It's not good. It's quite salty. So here's the next thing. If I take the same salt packet and I put it in this cup and I stir it up, much bigger cup. How's it going to taste? And I can tell you, I can taste a hint of salt in it, but it's not overpowering. And then finally, if I have this really big cup and I put the salt in, comes in there, and I go ahead and stir it up, and I take a drink. Well, if you guess it doesn't taste salty at all, you'd be correct. And the reason I like to use that analogy is this is the idea of mindfulness with your kids. A lot of us, not just kids, but parents, our containers, our awareness is about this small, because we're just so focused on this thing that we have going on. And when our awareness is this small, when hard things happen, it's very salty. It's very overwhelming for us emotionally. And so mindfulness, taking time to slow down and expand one's awareness, helps when salty things happen for it to be diluted, for it to not feel so overwhelming. So you always want to try to build your child's awareness of being aware of their thoughts and feelings and creating larger and larger awareness, because when that happens, we're able to cope with things more easily. So that's the first skill, is use mindfulness. And again, try to get to the wise mind. Now, the second way you get to wise mind is to help your kids be dialectical thinkers. So I talked to you and I said, this is about dialectic behavior therapy. So what is a dialectic? So I've said, throw some things in the chat, but you can think about throwing some things in the chat now. Dialectics are essentially a fancy word for two opposites can be true. So if we could see each other, and I asked, audience out there, how many of you have ever loved somebody and hated them at the same time? Probably a good portion of us would say yes. How many of us have ever been happy and sad at the same time? How many of you have ever been really tough on your kids and really soft with your kids at the same time? And the list goes on. And the reality is that things that seemingly are opposite can actually be true. And one of the things we want to do is help our kids start seeing both sides of things and thinking dialectically. So just throwing in here, we'll just do a couple. What do you see when you look at this picture? So you can go ahead and throw something in the chat. What do people see? Leah sees a duck. Greg sees a duck and a rabbit. Okay, we got a lot of people coming in, ducks and rabbits, ducks. And so some people will see a rabbit, some people will see a duck, some people will see both. And which one is correct? Heather cannot see the rabbit. So Heather, if you turn your head like this, you can see the beak becomes 2 ears and the duck's eyes become the rabbit's eyes, but you kind of have to tilt your head. And the reality is everybody's right. You know, it is a duck, it is a rabbit, and it is both. All are true. Now, wouldn't it be cool if we could teach our kids this, right? When somebody says something that person's not right or wrong, like there's truth in everything and people have different perspectives. This came out a few years ago. What color is the dress? You know, so what do people see here? Okay, so we have blue and black, white and gold, blue and gold. So are we all hallucinating? I cannot see blue and black. I only see white and gold. The reality is for different people, they see different things, and all of them are true. And then the final one, what do you see here? Okay, we got some frogs that people are seeing. Lots of frogs. Now, when I look at this, I can see a horse. Yeah, there we go. We got some people seeing horses. So if you can't see the horse, if you tilt your head like this, the lily pad the frog is on becomes the horse's mane. The frog's eyes become the horse's nose. And if you can't see the frog, again, the horse's nostril is the frog's eyes. And we're all right. Everybody's right. So the goal is to help your kids think dialectically. And dialectical thinking means that there's truth in opposites. So this is the worst year ever. The opposite of that would be this is the best year ever. A dialectical statement would be this is a really challenging and interesting year. Now, wouldn't it be cool if kids could frame things instead of this is the worst year ever, that this is a challenging year? It's much more effective. School is a waste of my time. The opposite of that is school is completely valuable. The middle ground is, you know what, some things in school aren't that helpful, but there's some really cool things about school. All right, my teacher is the worst. My teacher is the best. My teacher is a complicated person who's challenging me. Again, a much better statement than my teacher is the worst. Okay, I'm totally fine. Life is a complete mess. Right now, things are stressful. So just think about how can you bring your kid to the middle? And if they're on the extreme, what is the other extreme? And kind of the truth in both of those. So the other day I used dialectics. I was driving and this person in front of me had a bumper sticker. Doesn't matter what it was, but I completely disagreed with everything about the bumper sticker. And I started thinking like, this person is an a-hole and I hate this human being. And I caught myself and I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm thinking extreme. So the dialectic is, this is the worst person, this is the best person. You know, really, this is a person who's passionate about their views just like I am. Okay, that's it. And I was able to laugh at myself. So how do you get your kids to think dialectically? I would encourage you to adopt these rules for your house as you start this year. Get rid of these words. You don't need to use them. And when you use these words, it's the opposite of dialectical thinking. Okay? Never is a terrible term because rarely do things never happen. Like being able to tell your kid, like, you never take out the trash. There's probably a time they have. So be more accurate, you know, like often this isn't happening. So get rid of never and always. Get rid of but, you don't need it. So catch your kids when they say this. Catch yourself when you say it. So I could say, you know, like, you're a really great audience, but, you know, the presentation I did last week, wow, they were great. The problem with but is it takes away the thing that you were saying before. So instead use the word and. You're a really great audience and the audience I had last week was great. Both can be true. So again, we do this with kids. Like, I really appreciate, you know, like you're trying, but, and instead just use and. And then finally get rid of should. Should puts people in the past. There's nothing you can do about should. So, you know, I should have studied for that test. You should have done this. Instead, you know, in the future, I want you to do this. I need to focus on this. So think about how you can maybe catch yourself and catch your kids with those words and use words that are more accurate. And that helps make you a more flexible thinker. All right, so we talked about one of the first areas, One of the other major dialectics of DBT is acceptance versus change. And in this model, acceptance is everybody is doing the very best they can. So your kids are doing the best they can. You as parents are doing the best you can. And the opposite is everybody can be doing better. Both are true. So we're always balancing acceptance and change. I'm doing the best I can and I can do better. Both are true. So in DBT, we teach a couple of different skills. We teach acceptance skills and change skills. So I just talked to you about mindfulness. So the other 3 areas I'm going to talk to you about, and then I'll open up for questions, are a couple of skills from distress tolerance. And then we'll talk about the change skills, which are emotion regulation and interpersonal effectiveness. Okay, so distress tolerance is basically how do you get through a situation without making it worse? And sometimes we need to teach our kids and accept that our kids are going to be really distressed, and that's hard, but it's okay. And how do you get through it without making it worse? Like without cutting, without, breaking something, without screaming. And there's a couple of different ways to do this. So one of the tips I tell parents is it's a fun activity as a family, but everybody in the family sit down and have a night where you create a distress tolerance crisis box. And if you think about it, in your house, you have like a first aid kit. And so if there's like a cut or something that happens, you can immediately get what you need. You don't go to the store. You don't have to go around your house looking for things. It's all right there. So you do the same thing for mental health. And your distress tolerance skill box, there's all kinds of things in it. So it can have like fidgets in it or putty in it. But this is a fun thing for people to put together. If you Google distress tolerance boxes, there are all kinds of things out there that will give you a list of things you can put in your box. This is mine. So I have some model magic in here. I've got some Play-Doh and some calming putty. I've got some essential oils of smells I really love. I've got some finger paints, so something pretty tactile. I have a Lego set because sometimes when I need to take my mind off something, building something helps me. I always joke fidget spinners aren't just for kids. I have a gratitude journal in here. I joke with my teenagers, I'm like, these are called photographs. This is what we had before we had phones. And I just have pictures of some of my most favorite places because sometimes you don't need to be on your phone when you're distressed. So having something like this is helpful. And then I have a letter from my wife about why she cares about me. So these are all things that if I were in a crisis, I could pull out and it would give me a bunch of stuff to do to help myself. So I encourage you to think about making this with your kids. You can make big ones for them to keep under their bed at home. You can make small ones for them to have in their backpacks. But again, this helps just normalize that all of us have stress, and having a go-to can be pretty helpful. The other thing I like to tell parents about is when you're in a lot of distress, that means your sympathetic system is aroused. So you're in that fight or flight. And so some of the things you can do to bring it down are what we call tip skills. So being able to splash or put your head in cold water is a really great skill. So especially for little kids, you have a kid who's really, really upset, say, we're going to go to the sink and we're going to put our head in water, and it will immediately calm them down. For older kids, sometimes ice packs are helpful, but you want to make sure the ice pack comes across this part right above your forehead, because there's something called the mammalian dive reflex. And when cold water hits right here, so like when you're diving in a pool or you have cold sensation here, it's what triggers this calming sensation in your body. Again, doing things like physical activity. So if you have a kid who's really upset, especially young kids, let's do some jumping jacks, let's run, let's do some burpees together. And then finally, paced breathing. So if you have a kiddo that's especially good for teenagers who get really, really overwhelmed, paced breathing means that you just breathe in for a certain count and you breathe out. So I breathe in for 4 seconds, I hold it for 4 seconds, and then I breathe out for 5 seconds. And what this does is it helps calm your system down because you're doing deep breathing, but it also gives your mind something to focus on. But the tip here I always tell parents is you have to breathe out longer than you breathe in. That's what initiates your parasympathetic response. So again, you're not going to do all of these, but think, is there one of these things that I could start doing or talk to my kids about when they're really distressed that this could be a go-to and something they can practice. Now, if you're already good at one of them, pick something else and build your kids' toolkit, and don't just rely on a few tools, because if you use the same tool over and over, it gets dull. And so you need to have a variety of tools. The other thing I encourage is to have these conversations with your kids about dealing with the unknown. So there are 4 things you can do when you're dealing with the unknown. You can fix it. So if there's a problem, you kind of address it and say, how do I fix this problem? You can change how you feel about it. So say that your kid is struggling in school and they hate their math class. Okay, well, can we fix the problem? Can we just transfer you to a different class? Well, that probably isn't something you could do. If there's a way to fix it, go for it. But oftentimes, if you can't, then can you just change how you feel? Like maybe can you just start liking your math class? It's usually a hard way to go. This is what I do usually, stay miserable or make it worse. So I'm going to hate going to that class every single day. I'm going to complain about it. I'm going to push back against it, or we can radically accept it. And so a lot of times, like even with young kids, I'll sit down and say, okay, which 4 of these things can we do? If we can fix it, great. If we can't, can you change how you can feel about it? No. What would make it miserable or make it worse? Are you already doing that? And if you are, can we radically accept it? And what radical acceptance is teaching your kids what can they control and what can't they control. So you can't change if you have to go to math class. So instead, can you just accept, okay, I have to go to math class. How am I going to cope with it instead? So you move towards a growth mindset of what am I going to do to cope versus trying to change something that you can't. Stephen Covey, he in his Habits for Highly Successful People actually have people draw circles. And you have a circle of concern, which is pretty big, and then you have an area of influence that's much smaller. And so having your kids write down, these are all my problems, and which of those can you control and which can't you control? So I control if I get a tutor, I can control if I ask for help, I can control if I like eat before I go to class, so I'm not like more ornery. Those are things you can control, but you can't necessarily control if you get to go to the class or not, or what your teacher's going to do. In general, these are the things that usually teens and kids are able to control. And so helping them focus on those things when a situation really can't be changed is a wonderful skill set for dealing with transitions and dealing with difficult things in life. So let's take a moment and let's think about what can we actually control. And let's focus on that instead of spending most of our time focusing on the things we can't control, even though they affect us. Okay, so that's a whirlwind, right? We just talked about 4 different skills. So mindfulness, dialectic thinking for acceptance. And then when you're in a lot of distress, how do you accept that situation? Well, you can use distraction through a coping toolkit. You can use some of the tip skills to help kind of calm your body. And then finally, you can use radical acceptance. So focusing your kids on what they can control. So that's where we are right now. Okay. So the second part, I see questions coming in, so I'm definitely going to circle back to those. The last 2 skills that I want to talk about are the change skills. So how can you change things? So sometimes parents ask, what's the difference between distress tolerance and emotion regulation? Well, distress tolerance are the skills when you can't change a situation and you're super distressed. How do you get through it? Emotion regulation are proactive things. So how do you turn up positive emotions and how do you turn down hard or difficult emotions? And really get away from bad emotions, that things are, like I feel bad. What is it that you feel? Bad is not actually an emotion. So try to like take out judgmental language around emotions and instead get kids to be more specific. Oftentimes I have parents say, how do I build a resilient kid? This is the formula. It's called ABC, please. This is the foundation of resiliency. Now, again, I'm giving you a lot of information and there's no way you can do it all. So the idea is, can you do one of these things and make it the focus of your family for the next 2 months? Now, one of the things we know that's like incredibly important is accumulating positive emotions. And so we have kind of a wellness tank, and whenever you have stress, whenever you have big decisions, it draws on that tank. And if we're not adding fuel to the tank, we're going to basically burn ourselves out, and that's where mental health problems come. And these are the ways that you consistently fuel the tank. So are there things that you're doing as a family to build positive emotions? And again, especially for those of you who have older kids, it's so easy to start a fun activity and then you start talking about something that's a hot button issue and it doesn't become fun. Like, I love my family and going home for Thanksgiving is really fun, but when we start talking about politics, all positive experiences go away. So these are thinking about, are there times where you are just dedicated to fun, to joy, to wonderment, and to awe in your family? So getting outside into nature. We have a family movie night every week where we sit down together and do this. So how can you make sure that you are doing that consistently? The build mastery is there something that you or your kids are really good at and that they are able to succeed at? So if you have a kid who really struggles in school, make sure they're in an extracurricular that they're just great at. And this can be something small. This could be community service. This can be, you know, like working with a band. There's a variety of different things, but if your kid struggles in one area, make sure that they have something that they excel in. And all of us have something we can excel in. And building mastery in something, I gotta tell you, it has so much positive benefit for kids' resilience. And then finally, cope ahead of time. This is teaching your kids problem-solving skills. So I regularly check in, even with my little ones, of like, how are you feeling? Is there anything overwhelmed? Is there something you don't know how to do? But with older kids, I always say you should say, like, what are the things that are kind of like eating your lunch that you don't know how to solve? And let's talk through them together. Because a lot of times we come up with ideas for how to solve problems, but we don't tell kids how we got there. So we need to start saying, well, I came up with this list, and then I kind of did the pros and cons of both. So teaching kids how to cope ahead. And then finally, thinking through these different areas, the police skills are your basic functioning. So if your kid has sleep problems, really honing in on that. What's one thing you could do to improve their sleep? Or how do you diversify their nutrition? How do you make sure they're getting a variety of different things that will help fuel their body? How do you increase physical movement with your kids? So I usually say, try to focus on one and pick one from one of the lists, and then think, once we get this down, what's something from the other list that we can really work on? All right. And then the other thing we do with emotion regulation is opposite action. And it's a really simple skill. You just do the opposite of what your emotion is telling you to do. And it seems simple, but it's quite hard to do. So we work with kids and we talk about, like, if you're feeling really anxious about a test, anxiety is an emotion that tells us we either need to fight or run away. And a lot of times we'll run away, we won't study for tests, we'll not do those things, but that actually makes the anxiety worse over time. So sometimes our emotions last too long, or they're giving us a false alarm. And when that happens, we need to act opposite. So talking to your kids, like, you're feeling really down and your emotions are telling you to do this one thing, but maybe it's a false alarm. Maybe your emotions are getting it wrong. We know the best treatment for depression is getting kids to activate behaviors to get out to interact with people. And sadness will tell them to do the exact opposite. As a parent, I deal with anger and frustration. And opposite action, when I want to yell at my kids, I whisper instead. And if you want to get your kids' attention, whisper at them when you want to yell, and they will listen to you. So this is a small thing, but something just to keep in your mind with your kids. If they have an emotion that lasts too long or it's too big, have a talk. Like, what is this emotion telling you to do? And what would be the opposite? And what happens if we try that? And when you act opposite of the emotion, it starts to change the emotional experience. All right, I got one last skill set, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So this is interpersonal effectiveness. So these aren't social skills. They're called interpersonal effectiveness skills, which means how do you work in a relationship in a way that is beneficial to you and the other person? And there's actually skills for connecting, there's skills for getting your objectives met, and there's skills for self-respect. But I'm only going to talk about connecting and self-respect today. All right, so got a video I'm going to play really quick. Okay.
There's all this pressure, you know, and sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Do you have a nail in your head?
It's not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing.
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail.
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just sometimes it's like there's this achy. I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. All my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Sounds really hard.
Ow!
Come on, if you would just
Don't.
All right. So okay, so it's not about the no. So these are called gifts. Is
Jenna, I'm gonna jump in just a second. I
yeah.
think that last part of the video was a little bit spotty for everyone.
Oh, shoot.
Okay, now I can hear you fine. So just if you don't mind repeating what you said like 30 seconds ago, I'm so sorry.
Totally. So did you see the video?
We were able to see the video, yes. It was after
Okay.
you came back, your internet became a little bit spotty.
Okay. Okay. So
Still a little spotty. Maybe if you try turning off your video.
here, let's try this. How's that going now?
I can hear you great.
Cool.
And I'll jump in again, but otherwise, sorry for the interruptions.
No, it keeps.
And you're spotty again.
Oh my gosh, this is crazy.
But now
usually
you're
don't have this
fine.
happen.
As long as
Okay.
you're not talking about the actual content of the presentation, you seem cool.
All right.
Still spotty again.
All right.
Maybe
jump
we try
off,
jumping
come back
off
on.
and jumping back on. Always the go-to fix, right? Thank you.
All right, my video is slow to start, but can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, and I'm not delayed.
Nope.
Okay, what a great presentation.
No, it's amazing.
All right, so I got just a couple more things. So I'm gonna hopefully this works. Let me know if I get spotty again. But essentially, one of the things I like to play about this video is clearly this now is an issue, but that's not what this person needs. And the skill that's really, really important for connecting is validation. And so thinking about this is both teaching your kids this and as a parent. As a parent, always lead with validation. It's the most important thing. And validation is basically saying, I see where you're coming from. It doesn't mean that you agree with where they're coming from, but you acknowledge where they're coming from. So that must be really hard, or that must be very frustrating. And before you go to problem solve, before you go to reassure, you always go to validation. Because we've all been there. You know, if you're having a problem and you're complaining about it and somebody immediately problem solves, you shut down because you don't think they understand you. So remember, if your kid's saying something and you totally don't agree, it's not about the nail. It's about validating them and teaching your kids how to validate other people. So how do you think that person feels? What do you think was going on for them? Is a really, really important perspective taking. So that's the first thing is leaning hard into validation. The other skill that I think is a really great acronym to have in your head and to teach your kids is called FAST. And this is self-respect skills. So sometimes people are like, well, how do I teach my kids self-respect? This is it. And so thinking about if your kid is having a conflict with somebody, go through these and say, okay, what's fair to you and what's fair to them? I do this all the time with teenagers when they're like, oh, I don't want to hurt my friend's feelings, or I don't want to break up with my boyfriend because even though I don't like them, I don't want them to be hurt. Well, that's not fair to either of you. So what's fair to both of you? Apologize if you did something wrong, but don't apologize if you didn't. So often kids, especially females, are socialized to just say sorry for taking up space. So catch your kids. If they say sorry for things that aren't necessarily things they've done wrong, they don't need to apologize for that. But do apologize when you do things wrong. And stick to your values. So if they're having conflict with a friend, what's fair to them? And what do you value here? Is it to keep the friendship? Is it to speak your truth? What is your value? And when values compete, which one is the most important? And then finally, just be truthful. So say it straightforward. So I often go through kids I work with, we go through FAST all of the time. When I'm having conflict with friends or family, I go through the FAST skills and think of each of these things. What's fair? Do I need to apologize? And if I feel like I need to apologize and I didn't do anything wrong, to stop that, to really clarify my values, and then just be honest with people about that. All right, so we're doing pretty good besides a technical difficulty and me talking really fast. We're here at the end. So I'm just gonna leave one story for you about getting into Wise Mind and thinking about frames. So this was when my daughter was younger and we were not blessed with good sleepers. And so my daughter had been sleeping through the night and then just stopped for like a week straight. And I remember waking up and being so angry that it was so tired and I just wanted it to change even though I couldn't change it. And I went to work that day, and on my way to work, I was listening to a story that came on, and they were interviewing two parents who just lost their 2-year-old to cancer. And all of a sudden, I just my frame just got so much bigger. And it was just this moment where I was like, wow, I am so grateful that I get to be up all night with my daughter. And that's part of really teaching your kids to be resilient and being resilient yourself as a parent is, what is the frame? And if I expanded or zoomed it out, what's another way that I could fit this experience into a larger frame that gives me more context? And that's the whole idea of all these skills. How do I increase my frame and my ability to see things differently? So as you move forward, again, I gave you a lot of information. I really encourage people to do a 1% change. If you get on a plane at LAX and you're headed to JFK and you change the flight by 1 degree, you'll actually end up in Washington, DC. So a 1% difference over time can make a huge difference in where you end up. So think of just one thing that stood out to you today and make that the thing that you really try to integrate and work on. So yeah, if there's something you're already doing that I talked about today, congratulate yourself. Is there something that you're doing but could just be tweaked a tiny bit? And that's the 1%, work on the tweak. And once you do that tweak, what's something small that you can add to that? So with that, I'm going to go to questions, but here's a couple of resources that I think are great that you can find. The Put Your Feelings Here is an awesome resource for teenagers. It's a great journal just for mental health things. It has a ton of great prompts in it. But some resources in case you're interested in learning more about the concepts I talked today about. So with that, I think we have some questions and I would love to have other people throw some questions in. And thanks for the up and down. Ton of information with some roadblocks, but we're going to be flexible.
Thanks.
And I don't have any of the questions anymore, Leah, since I logged out.
I can go ahead and read them for you. I do have a question. We aren't able to see your screen, so I think you put up some resources that we were not able to see.
Okay.
But I believe you gave us permission to share out your slides afterwards, so I will send a follow-up email to everybody who registered with a recording of this with your slides.
You seeing them now?
So yes, please put your questions in the Q&A. We have one question so far, and that is, from Sandy, the fix, it can become stressful too. If fix it means you divide parents and the dad goes to school and demands that the class is changed, or they'll fix it using violence. How do you address this?
Yeah. So it's such a great question. So one of the things in DBT, we always talk about like, what is the value and goal? Because in DBT, we say there's not a right or a wrong. We're non-judgmental. And so what is the value or goal that we want to have accomplished? And so if we want our kid to just like not have to deal with an obstacle, then having one parent go and fight to get a class changed, that's a really effective strategy. Now, if we want our kid to learn like that there's stuff that sometimes you can't easily change, then an effective strategy would be to sit down and say, there's no way we can change this. If you're as parents not aligned on that, an effective strategy would be to come and talk with each other until you can get to a goal or value where you're aligned. So that's part of it. Again, violence. So is your goal to have your freedom taken away? If that's your goal, be as violent as you want to be. That's a great and effective way to do it. And again, there's no judgment. There's no right or wrong. It's just like, do you want to lose your freedom? Because if you are violent, that's a likely outcome. If you want to be respected, then there's probably a more effective strategy. So let's talk through it. So again, genuinely, I try to talk to kids and parents that there's not a right or wrong, but what is your value and what behaviors will get you there? And if you're stuck on a behavior, let's just talk about the outcome that's actually going to happen and if that's what you want. So it's a great question because fix it is not a great strategy all the time, especially if it's not effectively getting you your goal.
Thank you. And Sandy says, great answer. Thank you. The next question is, these resources are fabulous. Can you discuss more strategies to focus on distress tolerance?
Yeah, so if you get some of these workbooks, there's so many different distress tolerance techniques. So there's 5 different skill sets. It's called like Wise Mind Accepts, Improve the Moment skills, sensory skills. So even if you like Google online DBT distress tolerance skills, you're going to be flooded with different ideas. And the idea is you want your kids to have a combination of distress tolerance skills, some that are distraction based, but some that are acceptance based. That like, I can breathe through a hard moment. I can, hold ice through a hard moment, that I don't always have to be distracted. And also you want to teach your kids, and it's not even distraction skills, it's just kind of perseverance. Because if I watch like a YouTube video for 10 minutes to calm myself down before I go like scream at my boss, that's great. If I watch YouTube videos for the next 6 hours, that's become a mental health problem. So you want to make sure your kids have a variety of different things that they're trying out to just expand their ability to tolerate distressing situations.
Thank you. The next question is, how do you help your kids go through the loss of a relative?
So this is a really, really great question. And so one of the things that I would talk about is validation is so important. And this is not where you reassure people. Sometimes people like don't know what to say to people when they've lost somebody. And we feel so awkward, right? We're like, I'm so sorry for your loss. But that makes it hard because then the person's like, okay, thank you. Now I feel like I have to take care of you because you're saying sorry. So instead, just tell your kids as it is, like, this is awful. Like, this sucks. It's devastating that we don't have this person still here with us to make memories. And you validate that. And then that's after you validate that and acknowledge their feelings and that their feelings matter, you can then provide reassurance, and our relationship doesn't end with these people. Like, even though they're not here, we have our memories of them for our whole life. And this is where you also work on emotion regulation. And so it's normal for people to grieve for months. And if we are staying home all the time after like 2-3 months and not getting out, that's where we have to do opposite action. We have to say, we don't feel like doing this, and we need to, this has lasted, not the grief has lasted too long, but like we have to keep living. So it's a balance of the skills, but I would start very strongly with validation and checking in and doing that often and really leaning into connection skills.
The next question is, how do you address the emotional roller coaster or struggle with acceptance with gifted students that often have more of a commitment to their beliefs, with ideas to support their beliefs, and struggle with acceptance of a world they don't always believe they fit into?
It's a really good question. So try to like keep all that in my head as you read it. I think, oh yeah, whoever just said Judy's House, that's a really great resource. I'm so glad you put that in there. Yeah, so I think with gifted students who maybe are like very committed, again, it's helpful to validate and to say like, okay, how you see the world, this is why this is really helpful, how you see the world and what's valid about how you see the world, and help build that psychological flexibility. Why do you think other people see it differently? Where are they coming from? And then go back to that effective. Like, so is what you're doing, like, what is your goal and is it effective? And for gifted students, if their goal is like, I'm going to stand by my values no matter what, like, and that's the like, I'm going to like promote that. And that's the most important value. Then it's like, okay, then this is how you would act and what would be the consequences. And so it's just helping have kind of ongoing conversations and helping think broadly about, okay, then what's your frame and what does that mean? And making sure that they're not like making reactive decisions, but very reflective decisions. So as you can see, most of my answers always go back to validation. If I could, I wish new parents had to take a course where they became skilled at validation. Like, it is the most important parenting skill that there is.
I agree. The next question. When my kids fight, it seems to escalate and they both try to make it worse. Can you talk about how to teach kids interpersonal effective skills?
So I think teaching kids these skills, and again, like dear man is a skill I didn't teach, but that's how you get your way. You describe the situation, express how you feel, assert what you want, and reinforce it. And most people don't use those skills well. When they want something, they like try to manipulate people or they ask in a confusing way. So I would like actually take time where you say, okay, we're going to work on this thing, and motivate your kids. After we do this, you can pick whatever TV show you want to watch, or maybe we'll have a fun dessert. But you have them practice the skills when they're not upset and they're not hot-headed. You never want to try to teach your kids skills in the moment. That's when they need them, but that's when they're terrible at them. So, like, I don't want to try to shoot free throws to win a championship game for the first time in the championship game. I want to do it hundreds of times in a low stress situation before I do it in a high stress situation. So you have to be committed that when you see your kids fighting with each other, that's not the time to say, how do they feel? And how do they feel? And instead say this. That's a time where you circle back when they're both calm and say, okay, now we're going to talk about it. Now I want you to reflect, how was your brother feeling? How was your sister feeling? And practice those skills in those moments. But again, if you get those workbooks, they have step-by-step kind of how you go through these skills, and having the kids practice it in non-hot areas is a great way to do it. And again, give them a little reward for doing it. But yeah, we do DBT skill practice every single week at my house. We have like a DBT night with my kids. We just do 30 minutes, and they're young, so they think it's cool. But when they get older, they will not think it's cool, but I'm still going to make them do it.
Oh, that's awesome. Next question. I have 2 children with level 1 autism. Can I use these same distress tolerance and emotional regulation concepts, or should I approach in a different way?
You absolutely can use these. And part of it is being really flexible. Some of these skills work great for kids, and some of them don't. And so part of it's trying it out. With kids who have neuro kind of diverse ways of processing sensory information, I really encourage the soothing with the 5 senses, that you can look through those, and like, so there are visual things, so there are tactile things that are going to be particularly helpful, but also recognizing for some of those children, there's those things that can be quite triggering. And so I think these skills will work, but practicing them again and practicing them in low distress situations before you move them into high distress situations is the key.
Next question. My challenge is to get my kid to want to join extracurricular activities. They always want to stay home and watch TV shows or play video games. And if I take away the electronics, then they just draw and daydream, again, not wanting to go out. Any tips on ways for me to nudge them into more social interaction? Her friends are the same, none go out. She isn't socializing in any way outside of class time and lunch at school. I
will say this is a problem with this generation, relative to like older millennials, Gen Xers, this generation engages in less extracurricular activities and spends less time with friends. There's a variety of reasons for that. So this is not a you issue, this is a generational issue. So the last thing I'll say, because I know we're wrapping on time, see if you can get them involved in activities that they maybe like would be highly motivated. So even if it's like going to a video game camp, at least they're socializing. And so that's part of it, is drawing in their interest. The second thing is to offer rewards. So like video games and phones, those are privileges, they're not automatic. And so you should have a limited amount of time. And the expectation is, look, in order to have access to these, you have to go do physical activity for 20 minutes a day. We have to go on a walk as a family. You do that, you get this other thing. And then finally, to encourage social interactions, start with small social interactions that are time limited, and that you'll have more buy-in. Okay, so we're gonna go and we're gonna meet our neighbors and their kids. We're gonna go for ice cream. It's 30 minutes. You'll eat an ice cream, you'll leave. And that's an easier way to get kids involved, of like, we're going to do a small activity. It's going to be just this much time. This is just a requirement. If you want the fun stuff, you got to do the other stuff. I don't like going to the dentist. I hate it. And your teeth have to be clean. So it just is what it is. This is for your mental health. You may hate it, and we're going to do it anyway. But make it digestible and make sure the dose is right. And if you get the digestible dose right, you'll get your kids bought in more.
Thank you. And I know we are right at time, so we just have one more from the chat. Just a comment that this was so awesome. I can't wait to tweak my actions at home with my teens. Thank you for your wisdom. And I have to echo that. That was amazing, Jenna. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you everyone who participated. I will again send out slides, or send out Jenna's slides and a recording of the webinar. Our recordings are always available at dpsprevention.org/webinars. You can see all of our past recordings, what's coming up next, but thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you all.